Hey, David, this is Alex. I hope you're doing well. I just wanted to put together a video to quickly go over the website speed audit. I sent it over to you and your team. All of the insights, research, and actions recommended are in the document, but I'll quickly go over each one specifically in layman's terms, because some of it could get pretty technical. So, for this audit, I reviewed both the US and UK site. The infrastructure is pretty much the same, with the exception of, different pages or copies, so on and so forth. Uh, but the websites share the same files, images, so on and so forth. Now, before this is an outline or research into our recommendations, but before we are to take any sort of action, we need to establish a baseline, which is what the current page speed scores are, right? So we took the website and uh, used Google Analytics, Google Page Speed Insights, GT Metrics, and Pingdom tools to measure the scores so that we have something to compare to after if we were to perform the actions outlined here, right? So you'll see like in Google Analytics and in Google PageSpeed Insights, Pingdom, and GT Metrics that the scores are pretty low, right, compared to all the other sites that they do measure. The biggest takeaways being that there's just there are several things that we can do to improve the page speed, and then there's a lot of big files being called uh, when the page loads, right? So again, as I mentioned, there's a lot of things that can be done to improve the page speed of the sites as a whole, but what we wanted to do is identify the actions that'll have the biggest impact, right? And that's what you see here in this bullet list. It's reducing the image file sizes, the HTTP requests, or rather, the number of files that a page speed calls in order for the page to render, right? Then we have gzip compression, which I'll go into detail in a bit, decreasing the amount of 301, 302 redirects on the pages, and then a CDN or content delivery network implementation. So going into the first one, reducing image file size. So taking the homepage as an example, images comprise about 70% of that page's size, right? Which is a lot, right? There's big hero images, which is great, but they need to be greatly reduced in size, compressed, so that they don't take up 70% of a page's size, right? In addition to images, the other component that takes up a lot of size as well are JavaScript files, right? There's a lot of that going on there. So our recommendation here is to, what we would do is we take all the images that exist on the site, download them, compress them using Photoshop and other compression tools that we have, and then re-upload them to the server, which should have a big impact on the page speed. But it's not the only action that we can take. The next thing is reducing the HTTP request. So, again, using the homepage as an example, before it renders, it's calling 179 different files, right? 146 of those are images and JavaScript files. That's a lot going on there, and that this is, I would say, the second biggest thing impacting the page loading speed after image sizes, right? So what we recommend doing here is combining JavaScript and CSS files that are similar, combining them and then minifying them to greatly reduce the number of requests that a page takes to render, right? Um, yeah, so that's our recommendation here. Next one is gzip compression. So think of gzip compression as you know, I have it in here in the document, but the analogy I use is if you have a file on your desktop that's 10 megabytes, you usually compress it uh, so you can reduce it to 5 megabytes and send that to someone via email. So it's the equivalent of that, but for websites, right? As far as I saw and in my research, there doesn't seem to be any sort of compression going on the website itself. So enabling this should have a big impact on reducing the page loading size. After gzip compression, then we have decreasing URL redirects. Again, using the homepage as an example, there are about 4,301 redirects. And the biggest cause of this is when pages get updated or the URLs of page change. For example, if the restaurants page used to be restaurants hyphen POS, and now it's just restaurants, any references to that page across the site will redirect. So needing to update that throughout the site is a big part of fixing this issue here. This is just a homepage, so on all the site as a whole, there's a lot of 301 redirects going on, and that contributes to the slow speeds. So we definitely recommend updating that throughout the site. I will say, however, that this, out of all of the recommendations outlined here, this is going to be the one that takes the longest because it scales up with the number of pages that the site has, right? And then on top of that, there are two versions of the site. So yeah, I mean, this has a big impact, but out of all of the actions outlined here, it would take the longest. So just something to keep in mind. Last but not least, what's not here is I sent you an update. I will include the updated document, but it's a CDN implementation. CDN stands for Content Delivery Network. What you want to do there is, because the site, Dimitri informed me earlier today, is the site or the server is located in the UK. The site will load faster for people in the UK, but anyone outside of the UK, the site will load slower just because physically the server is further away from those individuals. And so what our recommendation here is to implement a content delivery network that would host the files in different data centers across the world, and then the files and the site will load from the data center that is closest to the individual making that request, that loading that page specifically. These are big recommendations that we think you and your team should act on. What's not included in here is the scope of work or the amount of hours something like that would take. It really depends on a variety of factors, but just something to keep in mind. If you have any questions on any of these, if you want me to clarify further on anything, I'd be happy to do so. Yep, cool. Thank you.